study a little bit more about Oliver, and they're telling you to your face their origins because they're doing it again.
Mm-hmm.
They're playing around with it again. They also go into, you also go find a documentary where Stalin in Germany was making humanities too, as a part of the concept of the super race they were making. Because the idea is that the ape will be stronger and more savage-like if they can control it. So and more dispensable as an army. And I've even heard tales that we've created white people as slaves, and or for slaves originally. I mean, that's just another one of the stories that I've heard, which is another way of saying that is what they're trying to say now, that they are also creating these white people as slaves, these experiments. And so it's real interesting, but if you watch it for the subtleties and what they're actually saying, they're actually telling they're retelling their origins, which they've tried to hide so well. The only place you find most of that information is from Elijah Muhammad, which people try to dismiss it and say it was just some black Muslim stuff. But everything else lines up. All this caveman shit that they, yes, sir.
Right, I was saying that was the episode that was called Manimal, something like that.
Yeah, and there's a Manimal. They also call it Manimal. Something with the chimp human thing too. But the most popular name is Humanity. But Manimal, Manimal as well. They do refer to it as a Manimal. But absolutely. And if you hear just the goals and the ideas of why they're saying they're doing it, and if you line it up with the Elijah Muhammad story, it mirrors each other. It mirrors as something that already happened. They're going to get out and take over the world. Well, that shit happened. You get what I'm saying? That happened, and now it got me to watching all the Planet of the Apes again, which originally was always taught. There was no filter on that, besides that they changed the characters to white folk, but it was about the black people representing humanity and the apes represented the white man. And you really could see it in the weakest one that Tim Burton did with Marky Mark, where they refer to house humans. They refer to them as slaves. They did this, in every slave movie where you see white people sitting around the table debating if black people have souls. They did that same thing in this movie. I watched this last night, and they showed you that humanity was the black man, and this is pretty much what happened. Well, that's what we're on now. We're on the fucking planet of the apes. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? You damn filthy apes. Each time I go to the store, to see white people, it's like, this is a madhouse, you damn dirty apes. And then in the latest one, which was the most scientific, which in June they're going to do a part 2 to the latest one, which was of course the best one, the most updated, with Caesar, him being a king. Somewhere along the line, I did a breakdown of it. His eyes turning green, which was the green of Thoth. There was just so much. He had a scar on his heart, which was the scar of Hanuman. They chose to use an Indian woman, which represented Sita, if I remember. But there was like at least 10 other things I went through at the time that movie was out about him being a king. Now they have a new one called Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Now I think even Jesse the Ventura talked about this movie was a code because they showed them in the lab experimenting on these apes, which are actually humanities that they're doing now at the Yerke Institute in Georgia. And then he goes through all the paperwork and all the check with this guy and this source and that source. But like I said, more than all of that, what you hear is the Yaqub story being replayed over. And that's the most important thing because people are still on the fence about this. I don't see how, but still on the fence about this Yaqub story. And you can see it as plain as day being played out yet again. So that's real interesting. I think you should check that out.
There are a bunch of cross-species hybrids out there. Mules, ligers, zebroids, beefalo. We recently discussed the majestic growler bear. But we tend to think of humans on a different level from that. We're human. There's no species even close to us. How could we possibly interbreed with something also blech? But guess what? It's been done. And some say it could be done again. It's been done because we all have a little bit of Neanderthal in us, as we've discussed previously on SciShow. The average European is 1 to 4% Neanderthal, so in effect, we are all interspecies hybrids, though that DNA has become so ingrained in our species that basically it's part of what makes us human. But the more frightening and fascinating question to ask is, could it happen again? Many have asked, and some have even had the urge to try to discover whether it is possible to interbreed humans and our nearest genetic relatives, chimpanzees. Now, before we proceed any further, let's be clear that the official position of SciShow, and hopefully of humanity, is that this is a terrible idea. It is deeply immoral, the creation of a potentially sentient organism, likely with many genetic disorders, who is the only member of his or her species, so that we could study it for science, is bad and wrong and pretty much the definition of evil. But it is nonetheless a fascinating thing to discuss, as long as we're not actually thinking about doing it. So, first, is it possible? Well, humans and chimps do share a lot of DNA. They do have one more pair of chromosomes than humans, but different numbers of chromosomes isn't an absolute barrier to interbreeding. In fact, there are some species where individuals within that species have different numbers of chromosomes and they manage just fine, a condition known as chromosomal polymorphism. In fact, in 2010, a perfectly normal, fertile Chinese man was discovered to have only 22 chromosome pairs. In the end, the genetic difference between a human and a chimpanzee is roughly the same as the genetic difference between a horse and a zebra, and zebra-horse hybrids happen all the time. A quick note on terminology here: when geneticists create these name mashups, which they actually do for hybrid animals, they put the father first in the portmanteau and the mother second. So if it's a male chimpanzee and a female human, that's a chuman, and if it's a male human and a female chimpanzee, that's a humanzee or a manpansy. Yeah, manpansy.